Welcome to a brand new episode of IDTALK4ED Live, the show for the unsung heroes of education. I'm your host, Kwame Sarfo-Mensah. If this is your first time tuning in to the podcast, I welcome you and I hope that you return back for future episodes and new content. And if you are a returning viewer or listener of the podcast, as always, I welcome you back and I thank you for continuing to support this platform that we work so hard to put together. But before we get to our main event, few announcements as always. First off, for my people who are on YouTube, please make sure you click that red subscribe button so you can get notifications on future episodes. And also, in order to put together these incredible conversations with these incredible educators, we're always looking for support, whether it's financial or just words of encouragement. So if you are able to donate $1, a couple dollars, whatever you can donate at this time, we are always appreciative of the financial support because that allows us to keep this platform going and it allows us to highlight these phenomenal educators who come to this platform week in and week out. So for those who are on YouTube, you can donate to Cash App or Venmo. And you can see the handles there. And also, we're always looking for feedback as well. So whether you're tuning in on YouTube or you're tuning in through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the streaming platforms, you can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and let us know how we're doing. Let us know what you want to hear, where we can improve, and how we can keep pushing this platform to another level. So your feedback is especially crucial as we continue to grow. So thank you so much for everything. All right, y'all. So today's episode is about international education. So I know we've had a couple of episodes in the past where we've talked about it in depth, but now I want to bring on a brother who is at the forefront of this international education movement. He's been doing it for a lot of years. He's taught in many different countries throughout the globe. He's a leader. He's an advocate for international educators. He's a trendsetter. There's so many things I can say to describe this brother. And I'm excited to really learn about his work and I hope that you all will learn something from him as well, especially if you're somebody who is aspiring to teach abroad one of these days. This is the episode where you're going to get a lot of game, a lot of information about what that life is like and what you should be prepared for. So, without further ado, I want to bring on the good brother, Mr. Kevin Simpson, onto the podcast to talk with us about his work and just life as an international educator. All right, so let's get into this. What's up, brother?
Kwame, how you doing?
Man, I'm good, man. How you feeling?
I am good, man. It's another day. Just excited to just be able to share, story and work, and just to have community and communion with you today.
Yes, sir. This is an episode that I've been personally looking forward to because I feel like this is one where people need to have their notebook, grab a pencil, or if you're on a computer, Google Doc, whatever you need to record notes and scribe. This is the episode where you're going to have to do some of that today. So I'm excited to have you on and thank you, brother, for taking time to have some conversation with us.
Definitely, and thank you. And if I, sometimes I get excited, so if I start that run, feel free. I'll make sure I slow myself down at times. I catch myself.
Hey, brother, it's all about you, man. But I'll certainly give the cues when necessary. But no worries. All right, so let's start from the beginning before we even get to the international space. I know you grew up, in Michigan. So if I'm not mistaken, you were Flint, right?
Yep. Always
Flint, Michigan.
Yep. Kid from Flint,
All
Michigan.
right.
Yep.
That's what's up.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about your upbringing in Flint and how you were brought up, and what got you into the education field.
Yeah, oh, great question. Born and raised Flint, Michigan, that's home. Always claim that first. Grew up in the 80s, so it was a time when the city, was really thriving. My mother and a lot of my aunties and uncles were part of that mass migration from South Carolina down south to the Midwest. And they had jobs in factories. So, with that came, different resources and access. My mother worked at General Motors. So we had growing up opportunity to go, into, the shop, as they would call it, and see them in action, to learn about, that life and that path. But I think along with that, my mother sort of preached to us, my older brother and I, the importance of education, the importance of school, being committed. So there were always books, library books, visits. So when people come visit me, they're always like, you got books everywhere. That's, Mama Simpson. So that was always a big part of just growing up. And with the books comes different places. So reading about Egypt, reading about, Africa and all these places around the world. I think with that sort of came that curiosity. So I think a lot of that, it was just early on embedded. And it was always interesting every summer, even getting up to high school, where it was like, do you want driver's education or do you want to go to this academic program? So every summer I always took advantage of, we would go back to South Carolina, visit family some summers. And then some summers it was just being involved in different academic camps. I remember going to Purdue University to a law and literature camp, University of Michigan for like science, STEM focused camps, Michigan State for like boys leadership summits. So every summer was always, just embedded throughout the year with just learning opportunities in different places around different people. So it was interesting because I was initially, when I went to Michigan State University, where I did undergrad and grad, the thinking was law, go to law school, become a lawyer. And then my first year there, one of my first jobs was with a program called the Young Spartan Program, or YSP. And the big part of that program was connecting the university, Michigan State, to the local Lansing community. And so my job was as a coordinator. So I worked in-house in the elementary school directly with the principal and teachers. And it was to bring volunteers, to create different programs based on the needs of the principal, the students, families, the community, and the teachers. And so I just fell in love with that work, and working directly with the principal back then was Dr. Liz Turpin, with Karen Casey, who was over the program. It was planting that seed, which was education. So transition from my first year to second year in college, I ended up applying into the college of education, was accepted. And so just kept with my initial major, which was more focused on social policy, social relations. So issues around like race, gender, class, ethnicity, and added elementary education. So ended up pursuing that, and then, staying with that. And 20 plus years later, sort of went from domestic education to almost 16 years ago, moving from domestic into international education.
Wow, man. Wow. What a journey. So, I mean, we don't see too many brothers out here teaching abroad. You know what I mean? So, I'm interested in knowing, did you have any family members that taught abroad and you caught the bug from them? Like, how did that happen to you, man?
Yeah, I didn't. I definitely have family members who had traveled overseas. And then my dad was in the military. He was Air Force. And so he lived in the Philippines. He lived in Thailand. He was based in the Middle East. So like some of that sort of international component and the international travel and learning, just knowing that, he's in Manila. That's where he was stationed. That's where he was based. So it would have been my dad, via the military. But in terms of like teaching overseas, no. Travel overseas, few. And definitely like in Flint, there were definitely trips. Like folks would do group trips, or it might be a church trip, to Africa. They would go to parts of
Sure.
Africa or to Europe. Those trips you would
Right.
hear about, you would see them from time to time. And then even from some high schools, like it would be a high school trip that would go abroad and overseas. But at that point, I didn't even have a passport. I didn't get a passport till I was 19, a sophomore at Michigan State University. And I got it because I'm going to date myself. I had what was called a Young YSB magazine, had cut out and entered in a contest to win a free trip to Africa. And then I get a phone call like early winter of like, what was that, 1996, saying, hey, is this Kevin Simpson? You won the free trip to Africa. So that was my first time getting a passport when I was 19, and it was to go to Africa, to Benin. And I went with my cousin because I could bring a guest. So we two went for 10 days to Benin in Africa. And that was my first time overseas, first time with a passport, first time leaving the country and everything.
Wow. Well, you're better than me because I didn't start collecting stamps my passport until I started dating my wife. Man, she's like the big time traveler.
Yeah.
She did Peace Corps years ago, studied abroad in Ghana when she was in college, and then, come full circle. She's back in Peace Corps now in a leadership role, and we're here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Yeah.
So, she's been around, and I honestly believe that I caught the international travel bug from her because
Mm-hmm.
I know nothing about travel. I didn't know anything about global entry. I didn't know anything about uh, these other perks that come with traveling, and it's really allowed me to evolve into like a traveler myself.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just crazy how it can be contagious.
Yeah.
But let's talk more about that, man, because I know you've lived in many countries, um, teaching and everything, and I know like when you're in the States, the way that we go about instruction is very different, and even the way schools operate are different. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering, like, how has teaching abroad impacted your practice and maybe influence your overall views of education in general?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a couple of sort of things that stand out. Big standout would have been when I was working in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. So I went over
Hmm.
as part of a startup team, and I was on the math team. So it was middle years program, MYP. So I got IB trained, and our team, we had, so our faculty or our math staff, we had myself in the U.S., Carrie Parker. Who else was it? It's another guy. It's on the tip of my tongue. I can see him, but they were both from the United Kingdom. We had somebody else who was from Canada. We had somebody else from where are they from? He's from Iran, and we had somebody from Australia. So imagine all of us coming together, planning together. Now at
Wow.
times, because at times I remember people saying like, "Oh, I'm on a team. It's a global team," but people sort of, fight for, well, in my country, this is how it's done.
Right.
The beauty of this was that Carrie, she was our math lead, our math head, and the way that she just worked her magic around the team, it was like bringing the resources. It basically like bring the best of, resource that strategies that from your country, because it's an IB school anyway, it's an international baccalaureate school. So the whole idea was, focusing on local, where we were at in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, but also like bringing in this international component. And so the beauty was, it was never a, us, this country versus this country. It was like when we came to plan, it was like, bring the resources. These are the MYP or the IB resources that we have, but also let's bring things from our various home countries and look and see, are there like rich math tasks? Are there strategies? Are there any, protocols and processes that we can use at the same time? So that definitely was, I was, that's always been like one of my highlights, working in an international school. I always say team wise, like what she did and how she, you know, managed and was aware of our strengths and putting that together was like, just, I mean, beautiful, man. And so like, I felt like definitely like that elevated, because it was like, I'm learning from you and, you're from this country, again, it wasn't like this, us versus them, because again, I've heard of those, but for us, it was like, how best can we teach our kids, based on what we know about them? And then what do we know? How are we learning about each other, in our context too? So I think that definitely, like I said, was the beauty of it. And then my first international teaching experience in Vientiane, Laos, I think the big sort of learning from that was when I was introduced to international baccalaureate. So the school was transitioning to PYP in the early years, primary years program,
Yeah.
MYP in the middle years, and then to the
Oh, yeah.
diploma year program. And so again, had that training aspect. And then again, the teams were just global, people from all over. So my colleague Lara and I, she was from New Zealand. And so again, same thing. So we were able to, within our cohorts, so we split, and we were doing differentiation, for example, across mathematics. And so we were able to do input compacted math. We had kids in fifth grade that were doing like fifth, sixth, and some were getting to seventh grade math.
Wow.
Exactly. And then that was like right in, and so again, it was like this this ability to really be innovative, where, in the States we heard about it and it was things that we were trying out. I mean, when I was in Fairfax County, like various strategies, especially around like differentiation, to meet the needs of the kids. But then to see it, be able to do it, and then to collaborate with like our staff who were like from the country, and work with them, with groups, and then conferencing with scholars and things of that nature. Again, just, I mean, the beauty of, being able to like hear and see and implement right away, and then have like the director who, he was in like this central office. The director is like, and my director, shout out to John Ritter, always give him a shout out, was like right across, the lawn. So if it was something that we wanted to try or do, talking between him, Jody, who was over the primary school, and then the director. So again, that open communication, that ability to like, infuse, things that are different and to try. I mean, I definitely love, that aspect when it came to teaching and learning. So it wasn't like it had to go, either through a committee or had to go somewhere, and then someone else had to decide. It was like, let's try this, let's see sort of how it goes. So really, again, being in our context, innovative, because we were outside of our home countries. So I think those definitely are the ones that sort of stand out big time. I mean, there's plenty, but like definitely those two when it came to teaching and learning. And then I also wanted to, just to piggyback I said John Ritter, because before I even got overseas, and before I even knew about that, it was sort of like he was one of the persons, but there's also a brother I met who looked like us. So even before getting, into the pipeline of, interviewing, and then going overseas, I met a brother like us, and that was like 21 years ago. I was in grad school in Michigan State, and we were just having a conversation, and he was like, "Oh, well, when this is done, I'll be done with my program, and I'm going back to London." And so when he said that, I was like, huh? And so him and I, we had a chat, had a conversation. I just took, again, copious notes, because he was saying like, look up this group, search ISS, he was naming these groups, and I didn't know who they were, but I was just writing them down, just to, I'm like, becoming aware of what and how, to apply and interview and everything. And so he, gave that's where I first got that information, was becoming aware of, working overseas. And so I think, I always shout out, I mean, I don't remember his name, but just if I saw him, I probably remember him. But that was like that beginning. And then when I interviewed, which was through like Council of International Schools, COIS, I interviewed with, schools in Egypt, in Dubai, in Southeast Asia. And then the idea and the thinking, because people a lot of times say, oh, I really want to go to Europe, or they try to sort of name where they want to go. And I was just like sort of open. I said, okay, these different offers are coming in. And for me, the question was, where would I most likely not go? So I sort of flipped it, because I'm like, I heard it, Egypt, I've heard of, like Dubai, I'd heard of, was familiar with. But I was like, Vientiane Lao. I'm like, I probably would have never thought, to go to Southeast Asia. It was small. The school was a smaller school. It wasn't huge. I don't even think we had 400 scholars at the school at that point. Staff was from all over the world. And so that's where I went. And I want to say, I mean, like I said, I always shout out John Ritter and Jody Nelson in terms of just getting you ready and prepared, for the trip. So it's like, once I said yes, it was like, here's your mentor. If you have any questions, here is, someone from the faculty who will make sure that you're ready, set to go from between now and August when you get on the plane. It was just a smooth, easy transition to even when you get over here. This is what we have ready. We have temporary housing. Here's 3 different people who you'll connect with to see which house you want. Our housing agencies. To here's the transportation. Oh, we're gonna have loud language class. Like, it was so laid out. It was like everything they said, they delivered. So it was like throughout the process, before I even left the U.S. and then when I arrived on the soil, like they were there to greet me. They greeted me and they were like, "Here you go. You're now a millionaire," because they gave me $1 million worth, or $1 million currency worth of KIP. They're like, "You're now a millionaire. Welcome to Vientiane Lao." And yeah, so I especially when bringing people from different places, I always reflect on my experience and always grateful to them.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because you've been in a lot of different countries. Yeah. Because people are coming from different school systems from their home nations, do you believe that there's a greater focus on instructional pedagogy and not so much on materials? Because depending on where you're coming from, the materials that you use are different,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So there has to be a focus on how you're teaching the material as opposed to what resources and materials you're using to administer to students.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there was definitely more focus on like the pedagogy, the practices, instructional versus like materials. Because especially like example, like there were IB materials that were sent to the school as samples, but then a lot of them like measurement. So a lot of them have like U.S. customary. And it's like, okay, we're operating a metric system, for example, or like in visuals, images. And so a lot of times we get stuff from either the UK, US in the international context. And it was just like, there's going to be stuff that we have to rewrite. You know what I mean? Like that was a given going in, like, so how do you make this pertinent and relevant, for the scholars we have in front of us?
Right.
So that was like a constant. So you're constantly in that sort of, phase of developing materials curriculum wise, but then again it really was the hone in and focusing on just pedagogy, instruction, and practices. And then again looking and seeing folks that are on your team, what they know. I remember doing Socratic seminar, because I love Socratic seminar, so I remember doing that for our team, and invited, and we would always invite other folks to the classroom. And that's the other thing too, classrooms are always open. I always had a co-teacher in some way, shape, or form anyway with me in the classroom. And then kids who might have had the multilingual teacher, or we might have a coach in there during literacy or mathematics, because those same roles, international schools tend to have for the most part. But yeah, it was definitely, we were definitely open in terms of like working across grade levels. Even I remember we did 4th grade, 4 and grade 5. We did do like projects as well as things that were done across the team. So, and even like flexible grouping across the team. We did that around like literacy as well as numeracy.
Right.
You know.
And then with regard to professional development, because you're in an international school, most schools have the international baccalaureate program, right? So you have to have some type of IB certification, or even a PYP or MYP certification, depending on what subject matter or grade levels you're teaching. So if people are coming from different walks of life and different parts of the globe, how do they maintain their original teaching licenses while being abroad? Because that's a question that comes up constantly.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that too about the certification too, because I was sort of my route into PYP and MYP. I had neither one when I applied for those positions. So I always like to make sure I tell people, if it says, oh, we would prefer, you have IB, that doesn't, you can still, because I've had people now that I've like coached and basically they didn't have that background. And I was like, here, IB offers these webinars. Here they offer these, virtual workshops. Apply and do that. Learn the language and learn inquiry, and then use that in your classroom, and then document it. So have evidence of that in a lesson or a unit, or a video. If you do obviously with make sure you have permission and things. But gather the evidence, be a part of a book club reading that's focused on these topics within the IB world. So I always say that with folks, that if you don't have that background, you can get it. There's ways around it, because that's what I did. And I visited PYP and MYP schools, connected with teachers, and then started to implement that within the context I was in back in like Fairfax County and other places, and then apply for those schools. And the good thing is they were providing the professional development. So they were like, we're going to get you IB trained and IB, certified and things of that nature. But that piece that you said, that second piece on the professional development, because a lot of what we did when the company was set up that I had in Dubai, the focus was on professional learning, professional development. And so we offered like, certificates, that indicated how many hours. So when we had cognitive coaching we had NGSS workshops, when we had any conferences, we always had that documentation. We would identify the dates and times. Obviously they would get the agenda, things like that, but also how many hours. Because I've had to do that too. So when I was Virginia certified, but now I'm Texas and California. So I'm keeping those two. I had to twice during the me being overseas do the recertification. And so part of that was I was engaged with professional development whenever I came home to the US. So it might have been through like the ASCD, NCTM with math, NCTE with English, sort of depending on what that was. And so any of that evidence I would collect. And then I also taught classes. So I'm an adjunct at Framingham State. I was an adjunct back in Michigan State. So any of that I was doing, I did curriculum. I did some publications because at least Virginia, I know every state's sort of different. So every 5 years you have to show so it's so many documents that, you know, prove that you're still engaged professionally. And so, yeah, for us, it was making sure that folks knew that. So when you're overseas, to make sure you want to maintain your certification. So depending on sort of where that came from. So if it's Minnesota, making sure you know exactly what's the timeline, what's required, and then you're collecting that. And I would just keep like a digital version because a lot of the certificates and things they were doing, they would send remotely. So I'll just keep a file. So I just kept a file, just literally called recertification. And then at the end of that 5-year cycle, I would just submit that to the state with like application. And there's always like a small fee.
That's the same thing in Massachusetts because I have two certs. So I have my middle school math cert and I have my cert in teaching students with moderate disabilities.
Yep.
So both of them are going to expire in the next maybe couple years.
Mm-hmm.
But like I've been you know, doing professional development, writing articles, like all those things that you mentioned are things that a lot of people do not do or aren't even aware that they need to do. And then as a result, when it comes time to reapply to update their license, they don't have the documentation to do so because they haven't been keeping track of that running record. So, you know, I'm glad that you mentioned that because that's something that a lot of folks don't even have the wherewithal to do because they're so caught up in the practice. They're so caught up in just what's going on in the classroom, and they just tend to lose track of what they need to do professionally in terms of maintaining licenses and doing things like that.
Yep, definitely. And then like some of them like graduate credit, like I was in the international school leadership program. So all those classes and courses that counted towards it. Again, like you're teaching, mentoring, coaching, a lot of times that would count as well. So I was a host teacher with Urban Teachers last year. You know, that would count too as well. Yeah.
Awesome. So now let's talk about differences between international schools and then just your traditional K-12 school here in the States, because there are some similarities, but there are some things that are very specific to the international world. And then there's some things that are very specific to the K-12 world here in the States. So what are some of those main differences between the two for those folks who are thinking about making that move to teach abroad?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I always say starting with sort of recruitment. So let's start there. So, you know, while recruitment is like an ongoing cycle, there's really sort of like this recruitment season where it's a hype, like a lot of recruitment going on, which would be like right now. So this is like, if anyone's thinking about, I might want to go overseas within like the next 1 or 2 years, now is the time. You get a lot of postings for 22, 23, since we're in 21, 22 academic year and beyond. And some post positions a couple years on, you know, leadership positions that they know the head or a director of teaching and learning curriculum coordinator position will be open. And so I think a lot of that is just becoming aware of the recruitment cycle, the different organizations that you can go through. There's some that are free. There's some that have a fee attached with them. So I always say doing the homework around that, and then becoming a part of any either affinity spaces that are online or any international educators that are groups that are on LinkedIn, on Facebook. Because again, a lot of people will post positions. They'll also post questions, you know, about countries and things of that nature. Going into the next piece, countries. That's a biggie. That's, you know, different from the U.S. While we know all states are different in terms of processes and certification and things of that nature, countries are very unique as well. So international schools, I love how Dr. Danu Tanu talks about sort of like they can sort of appear as Disneyland in different places. But we always say it's important to research and become aware and knowledgeable of the country that you're interested in, or countries, the culture, the language. Again, doing that stuff in advance. So anytime I took a trip, a work trip, or I was going to be anywhere, Nigeria for 3 months, for example, I would always connect with people who I knew who were either there or had lived there, but also becoming aware of customs and countries. So to know that when I'm in Saudi Arabia and I'm interacting with, because a lot of training I did there were same gender, so it was just all men that I would train. And if I was interacting with a woman, that I would not put my hand out to shake her hand. I mean, so again, it's becoming aware of culture, because customs, and ensuring that that's a component, that you're as a learner, you're learning things in advance, and then also you're going to learn on the ground when you're there. Other differences, I would definitely say, when it comes to for me, I think the different types of curriculums that are on offer, huge in the international world. You have anything from Australia, UK, you have IB, you have American curriculum as well. So, but then you go to some places and countries, United Arab Emirates, where you'd have Finnish, you'd have Japanese, you have Russian. So depending on the context, there's different sort of curriculums on offer from various countries around the world. So again, that's one of those biggies to look out for. Accreditation. So let's jump in from differences to similarities. A lot of the similarities are in accreditation. So a lot of those accredited agencies that you would see in the US, you also see in the international space. So Cognia, Middle States, NIASC, IB. So a lot of those that are in the US, they're also there at the same time. Let's see, because there's so many. A lot. Even when we say international, I think again, the beauty of it, when I worked with an all boys school in Qatar, it was a majority Qatari scholars who we were working with. And so, but then when I worked in the school in Dubai, you had like 50 plus, nationalities represented. So, even when you say international, it's gonna be so different. It just depends on the school, the population, who the school is set up for, and who's sort of the target audience of the school. And me saying that, all boys, you have some schools that are, and we have those in the States, that are just single gender schools, but you would definitely have more in the international space. So they're not necessarily all mixed gender. Sometimes it's all boys, all girls, depending on the country where you're at. I definitely think another big difference is like the amount of time off. I'm gonna be honest, like international space. I remember that first year of VNC Loud, they were like, "Oh, we have they call it a holiday coming up," and we had like a week. I mean, equivalent of like a fall break in the US, but we had like a week off then. And then I looked at the December calendar. I remember we had like almost a month off in December.
Wow.
Like almost a solid month. Not 2 weeks, almost a month off. And so there was definitely a difference. The countries will have celebrations at the same time. So I lived in UAE, and it was like the end of November, early December. We had I remember one year we had a week off, and then we came back for a week and then had another like 2-3 weeks off, spring break. I mean, at times stretch your time, 2 weeks off. Some have half term. Again, if you're in the UK, they have, again, another break that's off. And then to be honest, like the summer, I feel like there was the stretch. And even similar, international teachers are always engaged, especially in the summer, professional development. So same thing we do in the US, same thing international students. So we're looking at what are the opportunities on offer, especially if you come back, to your home country. You're going to be looking at seeing what's on offer, what conferences can I engage in, and things of that nature. So a lot of similarities, yet a lot of differences. Definitely teaching staff, your leadership, they might be from anywhere in the world, So I mean, my first staff, they were people from everywhere: South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, US, United Kingdom, Canada, from everywhere, all corners of the earth. Most of the settings are similar. They're early years, so pre-K to K, all the way up to grade 12. If it's a new school, it'd be similar. So how a new school might have K to 2 or K to 3 to start, and then add a grade level every year. You see the same thing in international schools. Again, professional development, same thing. There's lots that are on offer. Difference is there in international schools, sort of these associations. Well, we have them here. You'll have like the Association of Elementary Principals, Association of Middle Leaders. You have those here, secondary principals, and similar organizations. But you also have the presence over there of ASCD. You'll have regional associations based on your country. So it might be European ECIS group of schools, and they would offer professional development, coaching, resources, and things of that nature. And so, yeah, like I said, lots of differences, but lots of things that are similar at the same time.
Yeah, man, and I know that that's something that a lot of people, they don't they just think that, oh, because it's international everything's totally different. But even in the short time that I've been in Ethiopia, a lot of things that go on here are pretty similar to what I experienced as a teacher back in the States. Um, but what's also interesting is the holidays. Like here in Ethiopia, you have like 2, 3 days off at a time every week. I felt like every other week there was a holiday. Like there are a lot of different holidays, here in Ethiopia. So that was something I had to get used to, but I wasn't mad at it. Definitely wasn't mad at it. Yeah. Um, but yeah, let's stay on this for a second because you were mentioning, different things like accreditation and just the hiring process. And what I want to know from you is there's there's been a lot of conversation about the lack of diversity
Mm-hmm.
within international schools,
Mm-hmm.
not a whole lot of representation of Black and brown educators in a lot of these schools. So I have a two-part question for you. Um, is this something that you've encountered in your own experience in the schools that you've been in? Number one. And then number two, why do you think that we don't see more Black and brown educators teaching abroad? What do you think is the reason for that?
Great questions. Let's start with encounterings. Definitely. And we collected data a couple years ago just to get a sense of, who leads. And for us, it was looking at State Department schools. So these are American schools situated all over the world. And
Okay.
our findings that it was majority was similar to what you would see in the States. 90+% were white men who were leading schools in Asia, Africa, Europe. And then we did a dig into Asia and Africa. Same stats. So in Asia, the majority of leaders are not Asian, they're white and they're men. In Africa, the majority of leaders in schools are not of African descent, they are white men. So, for us, it's come back to that question, but that's been the consistent. I remember going places and people said, oh, we thought you were going to be an old white man. And I would show up as the consultant or I show up as the facilitator of learning for the day. And I was like, oh yeah, no, that's not me. So it was that constant. So for me, encountering Dr. Jennifer Beckwith, Mona Fairley Nelson, when I got to a new school in Kuwait to work with them and their team, it was unicorns. I mean, literally to encounter when I met, Rod, who's like at a UWC school in Japan, head of school. So it's like when I find or I saw folks, it's immediate, like leeching onto them because it's rare, that you would see again a head of school, a director, anyone in a senior leadership management position. Rare that you would see them. And again, that was the data showed that, and think about intersectionality, to see a woman of color, Black woman, brown woman, indigenous woman, Asian woman in leadership, rare, and again, you're starting to see more. We're seeing more organizations that more focus on women in international school leadership and things of that nature. But again, it was very uncommon. Most of it would be a man, and most likely a white man, and most likely an older white man. That's typical in a lot of the schools especially international schools. So, and then part of, what, we're doing, and we'll talk ALOC too, is, disrupting that, what needs to be done. Why does that exist? So for us, it was like, creating that Aspiring Leaders of Color program because we didn't see one. So it's like, who's focusing on us and ensuring that we do matriculate? And then not only that, who's out here with the leadership position or experience, but they're not applying for positions, and why does that happen? Or are they applying and, they're not making, or they're getting to a certain part of that experience and not able to make it through. And so for us, it was learning that it's not just about mentoring. You also had to have sponsors. I had to learn, again, this language and lingo and what that actually meant. But us, why don't we see more, especially Black, brown folks in international schools? I think a lot of it is awareness. I think a lot of it is awareness that people just don't know. Because I go back with me and other people, I always ask, like, if they're new to international schools, like, well, how did you find out about, international school? How did you find out about teaching abroad? And a lot of it is either I had a family member, I had a friend, or I saw a post somewhere, or I went to an event and someone was like announced that they're going to be going overseas. So I always go back to that source when someone's like, oh, I'm interested in going, or someone referred me. So lots of different ways. So that's why I think for us, the big thing has been like, tell your story, share that out there, make more folks aware, of these opportunities. Because I've heard on the flip side of people like, well, I went on the website and, everybody, I didn't see myself. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't see anybody. So especially if they go on to see the senior leadership team, which we know the data shows majority of people are white. So it's like, I went on, but, I then questioned, should I even apply? So, and that happens. That's happened. I've heard people say that numerous times. And so I think a big piece, like for us, is we've been collecting stories at ALOC. So starting to talk to folks who worked overseas. Yesterday, we did our Asian leaders. So these are folks that are from the US, but they've been working 20 years, 15 years in leadership positions in Asia. So one's a new head of school, one's a elementary assistant principal, and one's a director of learning. And so again, the big thing is telling and sharing stories. And we're going to be doing that just continuously. We've had the first one, Black Men in International Education. And so, but I think making more folks aware, but even doing a reach back. We talked about that. I know Mona and I talked about looking at where do we go to university? So how do we reach back? So folks have said, I went to HBCU. So how can we reach back to those universities and give talks and share information, about, and again, it's just planting a seed. So even if they're new in the teaching, even if they're getting ready to start in the classroom in the US, again, it's planting a seed to say, hey, by the way, this is another pathway. There's something else that's on offer for you. You can go for 2-3 years, you go 5 more. I know people have stayed and still overseas for so many years and then come back, to the States. So I think that's for us is the big piece of how do you make more folks aware? And again, consistently just doing that and sharing and putting out those stories, because the more people hear, the more they'll know.
Right. And I think there's an information gatekeeping issue in the international education space. And just based on my observations, and I could be wrong, right? Because you've been in it a lot longer than I have. I feel like white folks, they just know the ins and outs of everything. And we just catching up. Like, whether it's the hiring process, the different recruitment cycles, it just has a country club feel to it. Like, to the point where you're trying to apply for jobs, and I've experienced this myself. Like, I'm applying for jobs and they've already got somebody in those vacancies because the hiring cycles happen around this time. Like, the school year just started, they're already hiring for next year, which is very different from what we experience in the States, right? Where you tend to wait until springtime to start looking for jobs, like March, April, around testing time, but they start like early. So like, if you're not on top of it, then if you're not networking around that time, chances are you're not gonna have a job come next school year, which is crazy because it's like, hold on, I just started a brand new school year. So I feel like that gatekeeping issue is huge. And we just have to find ways to get our folks to access this information so that we can get ahead of these loopholes, get ahead of these challenges.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that's one thing too with the association. I feel like more schools have been intentional about reaching out and saying, here's something that's up and coming within the next, they'll post it in, the different recruitment groups, but they'll also say, hey, we want to make sure that as a leadership team, we are doing our own work and making sure that we have representation accordingly. So we're going to, because I've had the number of emails that we've gotten just again with here's some leadership positions. So we want to make sure that folks in the ALOC network know and are aware of these, and I've had some that just, they'll do their own internal school hiring now. So they might not go with the agencies, or they might, post a couple of things. But some are doing their own, internal working. And, you know, again, switching it up and doing different. Because I think a lot of them are saying like we've always went with certain agencies. So now that we're saying that we want to hone in and focus on, you know, diversifying staff and making sure that our scholars and families see representation, they're switching up who they're going to. Let's just say that. So that's definitely happening more and more. And for us is we push stuff out in our Facebook affinity group. You know, we push stuff out to people who we know. People have reached out and said, hey, you know, I'm interested if you know something. Like I was a sister last week that she is interested in school in Ukraine. I know the Ukraine director. So what did I do? I emailed the director. Hey, Peter, how you doing? You know, when, you know, let me know about your position. He said, oh, good question. We're about to post them. Can you connect me with her? I already connected those two. That's done, you know?
And I mean, you're somebody who's very well connected, you know, in this space. So, you know, you're a resource in itself. Now, let me ask you this. Whenever people apply for positions, particularly if they are new to the space, typically in those job descriptions, they may mention something along the lines of, okay, here are some of the baseline requirements to be qualified for this position. One, you have to have at least a master's degree. Maybe at least 5 years working with children or working or teaching in a school. And then they may throw in something along the lines of you need 5 years of IB experience. But hold on though. I am at my first post in an international school. So already I'm in the hole because I don't have IB experience. So my whole thing is, how do you expect me to gain the experience if I am new to this space? That doesn't seem like a fair requirement. But time and time again, you see this in so many job descriptions for international teaching positions. So I want to hear your thoughts on that and how folks who are new to that space can navigate that and get around it.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the same thing, we looked at those, like what you just said for teachers, and we also looked at leaders. So if it says we prefer you have previous experience as a head of school or director, remember, we already have the data on that. Those are all white men. So what you really want to say is we prefer you be a white man. Because that's what Nadine over our Aspiring Leaders of Color program. When we looked at that, we were like, this language is really coded. So if you really unpack the language of who you're saying you want, you know, let's be honest. But like I said, for us, you know, they'll have that required list. Here are the requirements we have. You must be certified, you know. You once you have experience with technology and things like that, they'll list those things, but then it's the recommended list. You know, again, a lot of people look at and say, I have like 2 out of 3. And what we say is apply. So I'm being honest, we say apply and we say as much as possible. Then we would come in if it's a school that we know, we have a relationship, we know the director. That's when, again, on that side of sponsorship, like I will clearly and literally, like this young lady I talked to, I talked to her. She shared me a story. She shared where she worked internationally, and we had a good conversation. And she shared where she was interested in working. I was like, okay, good feel, good. What's the name? I know your story, know your journey, know where you're all at, where you want to go. And I was like, okay, I'll see if something pops up. I hear of things I could send your way, and that's why that connection happened. Because again, they're doing the same thing. It's no different. So that's what I'm like, when people are applying for positions, people over here, oh, here's such and such, and they're going to apply for this. So we're doing the same thing. So as much front loading as possible, as much before you even interview, before you even send your CV in, that might not have that 5 years. It's like, no, here's such that they're learning. Oh, by the way, have you seen have you seen this that they're doing? Oh, this is a recent journal here, so no, that's showing that they're going to be fine. Because again, a lot of times it is these pieces of, I don't have that. And when we talked to recruiters recently, they said that if folks only knew the number of people who apply for stuff and don't have, might have one thing, if not 0, under that list of, what's required. So a lot of people will stop because again, they're thinking, oh, they want this, so they're not going to look at me if I don't have this. We're saying, nope, apply, and like I said, if there's a way that we can, so like definitely our Aspiring Leaders of Color, we're definitely advocates for them and going to sponsor accordingly. But like for us, it's like, if you don't have it, still apply. and then there's gonna be a way that you show, because you might say, you know, I'm currently, like, it might say something about IB, and you might say, I don't have that right now. But you're like, I'm enrolled. So you're showing that I might see your CV and see that you currently have an introduction to MYP or introduction to PYP. So I see, oh, they're already starting their journey. You know, if the school is going to pick up. But then we also talked to like the head of school in Dakar, and they talked about Alan and his team and Nika. They talked about how putting those things down sometimes, again, it was deterring people, or people be getting kicked out of the application cycle. So they had a look and saw and said, we're going to pull some of this, because we have people here on staff who have experience. So we can do our own sort of coaching. We can set up so that folks are mentored appropriately, and we can, again, front load and say, here are some things that you can do in advance of coming here. So it's not this whole must have 5+ years of experience with whatever program. Because someone said the same thing with American curriculum, like need 3 years of experience with American curriculum, you know, but that's loose, because American curriculum means different things in different contexts. You know, I've seen that all over, you know. This is American curriculum mixed with Finnish, mixed with Qatari immigrants. So it's always, it could be a blend at times. So, yeah.
Yeah, man, for sure. And you know what, let's talk about, because you're doing so much. So I want to talk about KDSL Global and ALOC, which I am a proud member of. And, you know, in a short time, like, I've benefited so much just by being in company with the good folks of ALOC. So let's talk about those two organizations. So first off, how did you get started with each of those? And what is the ultimate mission for those organizations? What are we trying to accomplish?
Definitely. So I'll start with KDSL Global, because that's been a baby for 14 years. So when I came back from Vientiane Lao, again, came back with that fire, that fuel, that passion. Was like, you know, I knew I wanted to go back overseas. You know, I knew I would, you know, in my head, obviously didn't know where. So I said, let me just set up something. I didn't know, you know, what it was, no idea. So let me just set up something, consult, put a name to it. And then it was like KDSL USA. Again, no idea. So I knew I wanted to like work with folks, work with people who are, you know, passionate or interested in international education. Again, to build that awareness, you know, based on what I'd experienced. But I took and saw, okay, I love learning. So, you know, I love all things like PD. I'm constantly in this state of just learning, unlearning for myself. I love like connecting, you know, with others, mentoring, coaching. And so when I started sort of KDSL USA, I was in Virginia, DC. I came back. And at that point, I just sort of started working locally. So I started working with like some charter schools, a sort of network of charter schools. And then that sort of morphed into working on a larger project, math in Baltimore, and then in Prince George's County, and then went back overseas. And so then when I got back overseas, I was Qatar for a short period, and then I went to Dubai for almost 2 years, and then got back. And after I got back, that's when I was like, yeah, I think I want to do this, you know, like spend a little bit more time on this. And so when I got back from Dubai in 2010, I didn't have to get a job because I had that many projects lined up. And so I housed I housed all underneath the company. And so that to me was really sort of the birth of it. So that was around 2010. And then it sort of morphed into focusing on just empowering educators, and then collaborating with just businesses around the world. And when I got back to Dubai, I set the company up in Dubai in 2013 and ran it there through until the pandemic, because I knew I wasn't going to be physically going back and living there. So ran it there for 7 years. We really focused on American curriculum schools. So again, it was that whole, what does that actually mean? Supporting folks when it came to professional learning. So during that period, obviously there was a lot of changes going on in the US. You know, standards were changing. The Common Core came in, NGSS. And so our big thing was like, how do we connect folks, you know, in the Middle East and around the world to ensure that, because we were looking at associations. And so we were looking at seeing what was on offer, but I always look to see what's not on offer. You know, when people were like, oh, you know, we're going to be expected to do this, we need to know what it actually is and what it means. And so slowly but surely start to bring people to the Middle East. Literally, I was like, okay, I see these are the writers of the NGSS. Let me invite folks to see who's interested. Brought 4 people over. You know, these new art standards, brought people over. Common Core, here's some people who are leading the math in the ELA, brought them over. So we would, you know, I get conferences, we do institutes, and really sort of crafting professional learning based on needs, based on things we didn't see, based on what schools and leaders were saying they needed. So that was a lot of support, and that sort of led working with like different organizations like Pearson, which led to some of the work in like Nigeria and Saudi Arabia at the country level. So that's sort of like KDSL Global, sort of that on how the houses sort of all of the work, comes back to. So ALOC is an affiliation of the company.
Yes.
And so now all of the sort of the work, and so even with KDSL Global, I did stuff around like school improvement, school startup, mentoring. And so now ALOC falls underneath sort of this learning framework. ALOC started almost 5 years ago. We'll be 5 in March. So it started as an affinity group. When our international colleagues was told, don't apply for that, they want a white British man. And I was her reference. So, when people are applying for those higher level positions, especially senior leadership positions,
yep.
I'll put them on my calendar to check back, to check in with them, because I want to see, how are they going? How's their process? And also to see, is there anything I could do? So it might be, I'm interested in this school. And I'm like, okay, let me see if there's somebody I know at that school, I can connect, with, and things of that nature. So yeah, when she told me that, you want to talk about the flash that came. It was like, literally, it was appalling. And so I set up the Facebook group because I'm like, is anyone else experiencing this? Because I knew people had said where I'm from Yemen. They're basically saying I can't get a job. So my passport, my country, or I'm, Muslim. I'm so race, religion, gender, all these different, my accent. Oh, they're talking about my English don't sound right. I have an accent. So I'd heard these things. And so when it was like, when she said that, all of that, like I said, the flash happened, because I'm just like, this is utter foolishness. There's no reason. I knew her background. I'm like, you have started schools. This is not new to you. You're not new to the game. You've been doing this work. You have been over hundreds of schools, So I set up a Facebook group, basically saying like, is anyone else experiencing this? Because this is, I didn't have time. So, and literally turn that Facebook group into a total affinity group, folks of color all over the world, people of the global majority, and just start sharing stories, start sharing opportunities. And then that sort of morphed into the last couple of years into the Association of International Education Leaders of Color, where again, we focus on amplifying our voices, and then focusing on advocacy, who gets to lead learning. Because again, we saw discrepancies in that. It's like constantly, I'm looking at conferences. I just looked at a conference last week. I'm like, so all your features all your folks are white, and you're in the Mediterranean. And I was like, hashtag made so white. I'm like, I'm not understanding, like all of your other colleagues, some who are, and they're not affiliated with ALOC, so don't get me wrong, but still your other associates who you're sitting at the table with I would hope are talking about issues around diversity, equity, inclusion, justice. This is not siloed. So they did not invite you to the conversation, because there's no way that, I'm scrolling through and seeing this, And so for us, that's part of the advocacy. We're going to call you out and call you in. We do a blend of it. There's things that we just write to people, but if you don't respond, we're going to make it public. But, because our thing is like, in all things, no one has time for this. There's no reason I should see a posting for a session in the Middle East and you don't have one Arab. I'm confused. You couldn't find an Arab? Like, no one thought about this? And that's our thinking. It's like, people are so, fixed in who the face needs to be. For so long, it's been white, and you saying that's international. So what message that sending to everybody else? For us, again, it's how do we amplify voices and folks and people. But again, when it comes to leading learning, we could lead learning. I'm like, I know a whole bunch. Like I said, I know a whole bunch of people who can lead learning around the world. And I will happily send a suggestion. And then research. What are some of the topics that have been researched about us? So those are our big 3: advocacy, learning, research. I love it. It is it's a love of labor, because again, I think there are too many amazing people, and I want to make sure that folks have a platform accordingly, and that others hear and see from them. So it shouldn't be this sort of, we pick the same speaker and then we copy paste and put them all everywhere else. I want to learn from everybody. So like part of what we're looking at now is how are we what's been sort of historically called local teachers. So like
Sure.
you've been Ethiopia, might be at a school, an international school in Ethiopia. The local teachers they might be co-teachers or teaching assistants, but they're fully certified. They have bachelor's, master's, some have PhDs. And I've seen in some countries, they could run circles around the teacher from overseas. And so our thing is, we're going to put out a stance coming up like within like probably next month around that topic, you know, and around, and for us, it's inviting them in. Because again, we want to be learners of that country, you know, and how is that an ongoing part? And so if the school's not going to do it, oh, we'll do it, you know, and we're inviting them in, and we're going to have a certain, like, we're going to put, again, it's going to come out soon in terms of what we're going to do, you know, to ensure that their voices are heard, you know, because my thing is like, you only going to be in the country for like 3 to 5 years, maybe 7, 8. This is their country. Yep. So last I checked, you know, their kids are going to be here and, you know, going through this system. So for us, it's like, how do we rethink, you know, obviously us in our advisory council, we were talking about this, like the perception or what we were told when we got there about, you know, this teacher. But Mr. Pooh and Mayor Lee, the folks I work with have been stellar. You know, they did guided reading groups. They did, you know, focus groups in math and everything, you know. So, and I learned as much from them as they did from me. You know, I'm learning the language, you know, of the home. Yeah. I'm learning custom from them, you know. And so I think we think it could be done better. And so we don't believe or like this, what we've been seeing, these hierarchies that are happening when it comes to folks. So yeah, that's one of a lot that we're working on.
Right. And that was the last question too. So DEIJ. So diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, right? Like all the stuff we've been talking about for the past few minutes, all of it is tied to neo-colonialism. This is what it is. Let's call it what it is. It's neo-colonialism, right? Where you have like this white savior complex, where, you know, you have white folks come into these different international countries and they're just essentially taking over and not utilizing the human resource of this host nation, right? And it's like you said, we're guests when we come into these nations. You know, we should be learning language. We should be learning about the customs. We should be learning about the practices and the traditions of that country. But time and time again, that's not what happens, right? So in order for us to do DIJ work in the right way, because so often we hear about the fact that racism is an American problem. People say that all the time, and it irks me personally because I've seen it happen in different countries, and you've definitely seen it happen in different countries. So let's talk about what we need to do as international educators to do this work with fidelity. What should DIJ work look like and sound like ultimately?
Yeah, there. Let me I was making sure. Give me 1 second. I know we're recording. I looked. I said, wait. I don't want to make sure the phone is this. But 1 second on that. I know. Let me 1 second.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, but people, yeah, this is an important question, and you know, so many folks, you know, they say that, you know, racism is just an American issue, but it happens internationally. So, no, we're gonna get into this.
Definitely global. If we want to call it global, ubiquitous, whatever we want to call it, it is the same everywhere. And I have too many examples of, you know, someone that was to be interviewed for a position and being told, oh, they look different than what we expected of them because they were darker. I can go on and on for days with what people have been told, and these are in countries around the world. You know, from leadership to, again, who's leading, learning, and things of that nature. So it is not situated in America. We know good well, you know, colonialism. Again, we look at who ruled and where, and the spread. Yep. It was global, you know.
Yes.
And it's no different in international schools. Again, all we have to do is look at the data, look at the numbers, look at who gets to lead, and how that's been historical. I've been in schools where I saw sample school. I'm just gonna say it was in South America. I'm gonna call out, but the wall of the heads of school, the history of our school in pictures, who led. Not one person from that host country was on that wall.
Wow.
What message is that sending? What is that saying? Now I remember some scholars in Africa were asking, because they brought them in as a part of the recruitment process, to ask questions about who they want their future head to be. They said, we want somebody that looks like us. We're in Africa. Can you do that? These have been all the heads of school. We wait for somebody I want somebody that looks like me. So, and the thing we love is we have 2 youth serving organizations, and we're now collecting the list of all others around international schools who are, focused on anti-discrimination, social justice. But our 2 oldest, the organization, the Decolonizing International Schools and Reset Revolution. For us, the thing is, because I know I posted earlier about Reset Revolution, the scholars are talking about this. It's not a scholar issue. It's an adult issue, literally, because the adults are too afraid to say Black, race, white supremacy, racism. So for us, it starts with acknowledging. I mean, look at the history of your school. Who has led? Who's on the board? Because again, there's another report that just recently came out in terms of who typically is on the board of schools. It looks like leadership. It looks like the teachers. It put everybody in the same boat. Like, they tend to be European, if you want to call it that. If you don't want to use white, European. And so our big thing is acknowledge. Start with acknowledging your history. Start with acknowledging your identity, your who you are. Look at your mission and your vision. Does that match? So all those cute, beautiful flags, and when we talk about all this food we bringing in, looks nice. It looks cute, looks nice, but it's beyond that, because there are these hidden messages that are being told. And that's why I know we talked before, Dr. Danu Tanu's book. To me, that's required reading. There's no reason. That should be required reading for anyone that wants to come into international school ecosystem, period, point blank. So recruitment, accreditation, everybody should have that book. Everybody should have read it. Anyone who comes in should have read that book. That's pretty much the stance that we take. And we tell people that. We've said this should require reading. There's no way you can be in this ecosystem and not have that. And obviously it starts with, we saw a lot of this last year with this self-work, doing your own work, unpacking your own biases, your own prejudices, and how those play out. Because I was talking to someone recently and they were sharing like some stuff that they just didn't know. They weren't taught, And I'm like, but he acknowledged where he's at. He said, for me, I'm like, I have so much more to learn. For me, I didn't grow up. I was just someone the other day. She was talking about indigenous people. What do we look at these books? And then I'm like, how are these books still being approved? I'm like, because you look at their story, it's like in chapter 1, maybe chapter 1, 2, or 3, and they disappear. And so for us, like we've come up with the Beyond Land Acknowledgement Statement, because we did some learning on that. That for us is like, we want to go deeper. It's beyond saying acknowledging the land on which I stand. It's like, what actions are we going to take? Because we don't want to be performative as well. So it's calling ourselves in and saying, no, we need to make sure that we're doing more, in terms of like reaching out to folks that identify as indigenous and making sure that, we invite them in, we learn about their stories and things like that. So again, it's this constant self-work, it's acknowledgement, it's constant self-work. But our big thing is like, look at who you're centering, again, who have you historically centered, who have you invited in, who have you not centered, and who have you not invited in at the same time. Again, this work and this sort of audit that has to happen. And that's on the leadership side, it's on the teaching side, it's on the curriculum side, when it comes to family. So you see it's holistic. It comes back to the identity of the school. So for us, it's like when these schools are silent, because one of my favorite African proverbs, I remember reading this in one of my classes. I remember reading, silence is also speech. So it's like, if you don't say something, you literally are saying something.
Yes.
You don't acknowledge, all identities in your school. What are you telling them? When you say, oh, we can only read these books by these authors, what are you saying?
Right.
You don't have any Ethiopian authors? Are there no Ethiopian artists? Excuse me? So we only learn so what message is that directly sending? Because this is directly sending the message. And then our thing obviously is, and we always say this, like, if you see something, say something. And if you don't feel comfortable, bring it to us. So I think that's, again, going back to that being advocates for each other, and for when situations happen where people are like, I'm uneasy, I'm not for sure how to, maneuver. we're like, bring it to us, and we've had a lot more of that. And one thread that we're starting on Twitter is because still some people don't quite get it. And so I said, they're not going to get it till they get an example of how it's happening with some of your affiliations. So our thing was now making public some of the samples of racism and discrimination that are actually happening, so people can see that in your school that they're accredited by, located here in this part of the world, this is what's happening. So I think that was for us, an eye opener. We've seen the conversations like some people aren't moving, because that was a big thing. It's like, why is there not more action? You can, like, policies, systems, that stuff procedures that can be changed. We've seen that. You got board position, you have things, stuff can be shifted, but some people are moving at their own pace, picking and choosing what they want to discuss and what they want to take action on. So, but again, a lot of us have, I guess, in noticing and looking around the ecosystems, like, no, people are aware. Those book studies and, ordering those books and materials and those webinars, and those movies, that period is over. It basically get to work.
We're so past that.
We're beyond it. So, like, the independent study period has now passed. next phase. And so for us, big picture, some of the things that we're working on, just preview, we're working on our IDEIJ tool that's written, because again, we feel like it's more than accreditation. We need a standalone tool that international schools have access to. Written by us, written by BIPOC folk, reviewed by BIPOC folk, and it will be administered by BIPOC folk. So that's something we're working on. We're working on some short courses on DEIJ, because again, it's beyond just saying it, but it's like, how do you go deeper? And then we're working on a certificate, so folks identify as, or schools identify them as the DEIJ coordinator. We feel like they should have some training and support ongoing.
Ooh, I'm about to talk to you about a DEIJ certificate now. I'm gonna have to holler at you about that, man.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the book, Dr. Tanu, it's Growing Up in Transit. In case y'all don't know, Growing Up in Transit, you can get it at Amazon, you can get it and pretty much all the book retailers online. So make sure y'all check that out. There is no other book that speaks to the racism and some of the oppressive tactics that happen within international schools. Go get that book. All right. So we are just past the hour, so we're gonna start wrapping things up with this lightning round. Have a few quick hitter questions to take us home. First question: favorite country you lived in?
Oh man, it had to be United Arab Emirates. Dubai got 200 plus folks from all over the world. So yeah, UAE.
Cool. UAE. A dream country where you'd like to live?
Ooh, that's a good one. I've been back. That's a hard one. It would probably be where I first went. It would be Benin.
All right, cool. All right. A book that you're currently reading or planning to read?
Ooh, I have, because I got some coming. I got my stacks over here. I'm reading George Johnson's latest book. He wrote All Boys Are in Blue, so I read that in the spring. And I'm reading his current book over here. We are not broken. Getting more into like the family and his growing up. It's a beautiful book. And I have I call them fast reads and slow reads. It's one of my slow reads, because I'm just like, I want to digest. I literally want to just digest and just visualize and just. It's pretty good. He's an amazing writer.
Cool. All right. If you can invite 3 influential figures, dead or alive, to dinner, who would they be?
Dang, 3. Malcolm X. Every summer program I went to in high school, we saw Malcolm X. And I remember having Malcolm X glasses, shirt. I just got so into, and then, he was in Michigan. He grew up there. He was in Lansing, So yeah. Malcolm X is definitely one. Let's see. It'd have to be, if you said dead or alive.
Yep.
I'd be curious. I would want to put Oprah The one thing I know for sure, when I was always in the line in grocery stores, I would always pick up her magazine and read the what I know for sure articles. I was just, again, got fascinated with those, and it's something that I collected over time. James Baldwin, man.
Oh man,
yes. JB, yeah.
Whew. Man, that's a powerful table right there. Powerful table, man. Whew. Man, but Kevin, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast, man. It's been a great episode, and hopefully folks have learned a lot about international schools, and we'll have more people, especially those who look like us, making that move to come out here to this side, because there's a lot of good on this side, a lot of good.
Definitely, and lots of opportunities, and there's thousands of international schools all over the world. We always tell folks that, and growing. So definitely opportunities, and definitely, check us out. We offer ongoing learning monthly, for folks, a global majority who are leading that learning. So yeah, definitely, check out ALOC, your personal global majority Facebook. We have people join all the time on Facebook who are like, I'm interested. I'm just join us, because you're going to see the community. You're going to see people who look like you, who are doing this work all over, who are sharing opportunities, who are encouraging you, who are answering your questions, so,
Yes. And I can attest to it. It's real, y'all. ALOC is real. So if you are already in this international education space, make sure you become a member of ALOC. It is inclusive, is diverse, and they're about that work. They're really about that work. There's no BS when it comes to what they do. So make sure y'all check them out. All right, Kevin, man, appreciate you for taking the time to talk with us. And, we're going to connect soon anyway, man. So hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and let's keep on fighting, man.
Definitely. Thanks again, Kwame. Thanks for the platform and offering anytime. Like I said, anytime any of the listeners, folks have questions, reach out, let us know.
Yes, sir. All right, man. Have a good day. All right, y'all. So we're about to end another episode of IDTALK4ED Educators Live. And as always, I wish you all good morning, good night, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. And we're going to do this again another time. Peace out, everybody.